so we chose to depopulate the island, remove all the bighorns that were there, so that we could start over again.
The bad thing about podcasts is no one can see the huge smile that I have on my face right now, just because I still consider myself a Utah, and this excites me. This is freaking awesome.
The bison are so fun to see, and the deer are, world class, just enormous deer that you can see from the road. It's a cool area to go.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Taryn Hunt. On this episode, I visit with Jace Taylor of the Utah DWR. Jace is the wildlife biologist that handles all the bighorn sheep in Utah. And recently, Jace was part of a bighorn sheep transplant that KUIU did, moving some sheep from Montana to Utah's Antelope Island. We talk about the purpose behind the transplant, how the transplant went, and what the plan is for those sheep. I want to tell Jace thank you for his time in recording this podcast. It was a great podcast. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Also want to say thank you to Vortex Optics. Vortex sponsors everything that we do here at eHunter. We're very grateful for them. Don't forget to go check them out at vortexoptics.com. Thank you guys for listening. Please hit that subscribe button. Please like our episodes, share them, and leave us some comments. Would love to see some positive comments on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you guys listen to podcasts. So thank you guys for everything, and we'll jump right into the interview with Jace Taylor. All right, welcome back to the eHunter newscast. I am joined by an awesome guest, another guest from Utah. I'm joined today by Jace Taylor. Jace, welcome to the call.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. I've been super excited to do this podcast ever since we released that article on the bighorn release on Antelope Island. And, us as hunters, we love bighorn sheep. I think for the most part, anybody that does big game hunting, bighorn sheep is like at the top of our wish list and bucket list. And so been super excited to get this podcast going and talk about this release. But before we jump into that, Jace, would you mind introducing yourselves, telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, what you do, and those kind of things?
Yeah, no problem. Jace Taylor. I work for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. I'm out of the Salt Lake office, and my job is bighorn sheep and mountain goat coordination. So anything to do with any of our bighorn herds or any of our mountain goat herds that our district biologists are managing. So any questions that they might have, or coordinating efforts between them, or coordinating efforts between federal agencies or other state agencies, that's my responsibility.
Nice. Well, again, thank you so much for being on this podcast with me. One thing that we've really tried to do with this podcast is really talk to the professionals who are very involved in some of these things and have that background to have a knowledge base to kind of give us some of the details. And so what we're going to talk about today is, like I mentioned, that article that we had released, I can't even remember when it was. It's been a few weeks ago now, about the bighorn release there on Antelope Island in Utah. Before we get to the details of that release, so what's the history with the bighorns there on Antelope Island? I read in the article and that our writers put in there that the island has had herds of bighorns on the island. Can you tell us a little bit about the history there with those species?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, Antelope Island, for those that aren't familiar with where it is, it's the Great Salt Lake, right in northern Utah, has a handful of different islands on it. The biggest of the islands is this one we're talking about, Antelope Island. It's about 30,000 acres, kind of down in the southeast portion of the lake, so closer to like the towns of Syracuse or Bountiful or North Salt Lake. A really cool area. Antelope Island's home to lots of different wildlife species. It's a state park. People will come to visit it to see the bison. They're one of the most popular animals people to come see. Pronghorn, that it gets its namesake from. Big mule deer, and then also bighorn sheep are another one of the species out there. So when we talk about the history of bighorns on Antelope Island, there are skeletal remains that show that bighorns were there, at the time of settlement, European and Mormon settlers that came, and then for a time there were not bighorn sheep, and then the first reintroductions of bighorn sheep were done by the Utah Division of Wildlife in 1997, and there was a herd that was doing really well on Antelope Island. Started with only a handful of animals, 29 animals, but that herd grew and grew and was big enough that Antelope Island wasn't able to maintain the population by itself, and so we were moving bighorns off of Antelope Island to start other herds around the state, herds like Newfoundland Mountains, Stansbury Mountains, Oak Creek Mountains, and so all those herds, really are based off of the animals that we were able to produce on Antelope Island. But unfortunately, Antelope Island did contract pathogens that caused pneumonia. I guess it would have been about just over a year ago, a year and a few months. November of 2018, we started seeing animals dying from pneumonia. Found out that they did contract pathogens that were causing it, and so we chose to depopulate the island, remove all the bighorns that were there, so that we could start over again. And so that kind of brings us to where we're at now with the recent release of bighorn sheep.
Gotcha. Wow, that's amazing that they've been there that long and have been such a big part of Antelope Island. And I appreciate you talking a little bit about Antelope Island. And I would say for those that don't know what it is or have seen pictures of it, you need to check it out because there's some amazing animals on that island.
It is. It's a cool place, yeah. Or even just like sunsets. I mean, it's you got from Antelope Island, you look out across the Great Salt Lake going to the west, and the sunsets there are just incredible. Sunrises, for that matter, or even just the views of the Wasatch Front. It's a beautiful place. The bison are so fun to see, and the deer are world class, just enormous deer that you can see from the road. It's a cool area to go.
Yeah, I've got a really good friend, Justin Segmiller. Actually, it was his brother Jason Segmiller goes out there and takes a lot of pictures. And man, some of the pictures that he puts on social media and sends us, it's unreal, the size of some of those deer. And like you said, a lot of people will come there for the bison and the bighorn as well, and I guess like you said, the pronghorn's where it got its name. And by the way, for those that are listening, this is an accessible island. It's something that you can drive to. It's not something that's out there. You can actually drive to it and be out there on the island. And yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's an interesting place. I grew up in southern Utah, so only had the opportunity to go up there a few times in my life. But the few times that I did, I mean, I was just blown away because it wasn't hard. I mean, pretty much everywhere you went, like you said, you either saw bison or big deer.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, the animals are really habituated to people. I mean, there's lots of coyotes on Antelope Island, and if for people that like to see coyotes up close, it's cool for that. I think they're anything. It's just the birding. People that are into seeing birds that aren't necessarily common in other parts of Utah, it's a great place for that. It's a really neat, unique place. Really a cool place to go. And like you said, you can drive there on a paved causeway road. All you gotta do is pay, the state park entrance fee. It's in my opinion, well worth it.
Yeah.
Great hikes, a cool place.
Yeah, anybody if you ever visit northern Utah, I would make that trip. Just go out there and see it. It's fantastic. The guys that go out there all the time are probably going to yell at me for saying that and sending more people out there. But it is
talking up the coyotes on Antelope Island. People aren't going to like that. Right?
No, they're not. Yeah, I know Jason doesn't like those coyotes out there for sure.
It's a cool place.
It is. It's a really cool place. So you talked about how those previous herds have been used to help grow other herds in the state. Yeah. So where did you say that some of those herds are at?
Yeah, so from that 1997 reintroduction, over like the 20 years that we had them there, or 20 couple, plus years, we moved about 250 bighorn off of Antelope Island, which is, alone is incredible.
Wow.
The places they went to are the Newfoundland Mountains, so kind of northwestern Utah. The Stansbury Mountains, just going west of Salt Lake City, and then down a little further south, south central in the Oak Creek Mountains.
Okay.
um, north of Beaver, south of like Salina, so, or I guess just west of Salina. So yeah, and those herds are all doing well right now. There's over 600 bighorn sheep, combined in those three herds. So you think about the small number of animals we started out with on Antelope Island to now, even though we've lost Antelope Island, we still have 600 sheep in the state primarily because of Antelope Island. So a hugely successful, just absolutely vital resource to the bighorn sheep program in Utah, Antelope Island. And that, kind of when we talk about the sheep that got sick out there recently, we had to be faced with a few options. A lot of those animals were dying and dying quickly, and it wasn't pretty. And so, we had to debate whether we leave the sheep out there, and just let them, work through the disease event and, see who lives. And there were some good arguments for doing that. But if we let that play out, some of those pathogens that and this is from our experience in other herds in Utah that have picked up the same pathogens that we have let them just live with it and play out. Those pathogens often never are eliminated from the herd. They'll kind of persist in individuals who are able to carry them and live with them. And so if we let that happen, no matter how big the Antelope Island bighorn herd got in the future, it would probably still have those pathogens, and that would preclude us from being able to use those animals, that herd, as a source for translocations in the future. And so we debated doing that, but it just made much more sense to try to start over clean with new animals so that in the future we'll still be able to provide another, 250, 400 animals, whatever it ends up being, so that we can have more healthy bighorn sheep in Utah.
Well, that's music to our ears as hunters. Like I said, as hunters,
Yeah.
that's something that we want to do. I think most of us have that on our bucket list is to hunt
Yeah.
bighorns, and so I think you guys made the right move. I really truly do. And the people that I've talked to about this already, it sounds like not that your hands were tied, but kind of, because like you said, it was going to persist. It was always going to be in that herd, and so you kind of had to do what you had to do to eliminate that disease. So
Yeah. I mean, we have dozens. Of. Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, this is probably a good point to throw out a couple other things that hopefully your listeners would be interested in, because we have. It's one of the couple of things that we were criticized probably the most on. That maybe this would be a good time to talk about them. One was, why don't you leave the sheep there and let those who are able to survive with it, do so, and then you'll end up with a stronger herd for the future. But we've done that. We have dozens of other herds in the state that are doing that right now. And the fact of the matter is they just don't ever seem to completely get rid of those pathogens. And so that was the first thing. The second thing, and this was another hard decision for us too, was originally when we decided that we were going to need to depopulate, we wanted to try to use hunters to do that. And to give people the opportunity who have been, applying for the opportunity to hunt bighorn sheep for years and years and years. And here we had a situation where we were going to be euthanizing or killing a lot of them. And so we wanted to pursue that at the beginning, but there was a few reasons why we decided to not take that route. One of those was that it was pretty ugly out there on the island. I mean, we had truly sick animals that were suffering, that were dying, and it wasn't the way that we like to hunt. The healthy surplus that we have is usually how we base our hunting, and so it wouldn't have been, the optics of it might not have been what people really were interested in. And then the second thing was the timing of it. We needed to be able to depopulate quickly so that we could take advantage of a source herd that we knew about. And in order to depopulate and have enough time to get ready for that and make sure that the island was effectively depopulated, we needed to move quickly. And so that's why we chose to do it with professional wildlife services.
So when those animals were sick with that disease, it was visible. You could, like, if you went out to the island, you could see it and you could tell.
Yeah, it was bad. We had, people probably seen, the GPS collars that we put on deer and elk, bison, and bighorn, everything around the state. And so one of the purposes of those is for movements and migration, but another one is to monitor health and survival. So we had callers out there, and in November 2018 we started having some of those callers. Some of those animals were dying, and we had a couple died, and I was like, oh, this is kind of strange. And Antelope Island is hard sometimes to get out there to quick enough to a dead animal to tell what killed it, because there are so many coyotes that we mentioned earlier that it's carcasses get eaten up pretty quick. So we made a point when I think it must have been about the third animal that died in a month, to get out there as quickly as possible. And we did. Our biologist got out there and realized that, the animal was not, that it looked like it had died from disease, and we were able to get the samples from it. And then at that point, we started watching the animals more closely, and it was visible. There were animals that were in bad shape. I mean, very emaciated. They had a hard time. The ones that were, further along had a hard time walking, and I mean, they're animals that couldn't stand. I mean, they were dying daily, and so it was sad to see. So it was hard. It was a hard situation.
Yeah, that is. But again, I feel like you guys, again, not that your hands were tied, but I feel like you guys made the right decision, because that no one wants to see that. And then again, you really can't, as biologists, you really can't do much with that, because you're not going to take that to other herds or really grow that herd. So yeah, I think you guys made the right decision, and the future's bright as of now for the island and the changes you guys have made. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this transplant that you guys did recently. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of this particular transplant? Maybe who all was involved and kind of how the process went with it?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, kind of coming full circle, because we were able to do this quickly with Wildlife Services. There's a lot of partners that we have. Between Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife and Utah Wild Sheep Foundation, even the Wool Growers Association, Utah Department of Ag, so many Wildlife Services and some laboratories, and just so many folks that went into getting Antelope Island ready as quickly as possible for more bighorn sheep. And we really were appreciative of them. And the biggest of all is definitely, state parks, Utah State Parks and Antelope Island State Park. I mean, sometimes we kind of take for granted that wildlife should be there, and everyone should make that happen. But I mean, it's their land. They've put a lot of effort, and we're really accommodating to depopulating, which isn't always an easy thing to do, on a state park where people are coming to watch animals. I mean, there was a wildlife fence that was built on the south end of Antelope Island to try to prevent any pathogen exchange that direction, that state parks funded and built, or contracted out to be built, which was a huge undertaking, a huge expense. So, I mean, big thanks to Antelope Island State Park and Utah State Parks in general for making this possible, and then all the other partners that went into making this happen so quickly. And so then, we needed bighorn sheep. We needed some more animals to bring out there, and we had a source in mind going into this, even for a year or more before the Antelope Island disease event. We'd been working with Brendan Burns and Kuyu. Brendan Brendan's title is the chief hunting officer, and he's also the conservation director. And so in his capacity as the conservation director, he'd been working with a tribe in Montana, Rocky Boys Reservation, up there in north central Montana, to try to manage their bighorn sheep herd, which has been growing larger than they wanted it to be. And so they'd been looking for a good destination for the animals. And so we'd been in Utah trying for at least a year to try to find a suitable destination. We didn't have one at the time until Antelope Island had their disease event, and we realized this could be a great opportunity for both of us to have animals reducing from their herd and coming and restarting Antelope Island. So we're able to move quickly, and gratefully we're able to get those animals here.
That's so awesome. And I saw on social media, and actually we shared the post of when the bighorns were released onto the island, and all the people lined up there. You could see that it was a big crew that made this happen. I know Kuyu was a huge part in it, and Brendan was a huge part in doing this, but it was so cool to see everybody, there to help support this.
Yeah, a lot of partners. And for the translocation itself, so then, Brendan and Kuyu had been looking for this destination. And once we had Antelope Island ready, there was also a destination in North Dakota that was ready. And so they was really impressed really with Brendan and with Kuyu for all the work, that not just the money, but the time that they put into this to orchestrate, organize all logistics on that end of the translocation. So in Montana with Rocky Boy Reservation. And then also the funding of it. They paid for all of the capture that happened up there. There was a pre-test, a health screening essentially that the animals passed that took some capturing. And then we received 25 animals, and I want to say North Dakota got 30. And so, I mean, to capture all those animals is a serious cost. And then because the animals were on, sovereign nation, the tribal land of Rocky Boy Reservation, they own the animals, and so there was a cost to have those animals, the ownership transferred, which was a significant cost as well. And so all of that was coordinated, orchestrated, paid for by Kuyu and their customers. And so really grateful for all of the effort that went into that from them, and just really impressed with them and their effort and their time and their money that they spent on this translocation.
That truly is amazing. And I'm going to put a little plug out there for QU, because just as a hunter, a conservationist myself, just to see what they're doing with conservation and doing projects like this, like you said, that's not a cheap thing to do. I don't know what that dollar amount is. I probably don't want to know what that dollar amount is, but I do want to kind of take this opportunity to thank QU for funding that and making this whole thing possible. And I actually wasn't even aware that they did it for North Dakota as well. I mean, I thought the Utah Antelope Island, that one was big enough, but to do two of them in two different places, I mean, that is really cool. And shout out to QU and Brendan for making that possible. Man, what a cool thing for a company like that to do.
Yeah, and I mean, we have partners that other state agencies or conservation groups here in Utah, SFW and Utah Wild Sheep Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation. Those are some of the bigger ones that I work with. I mean, we also have SCI and Utah Archery Association and National Wild Turkey Federation. All those are folks that I work closely with on a lot of projects. They deserve a lot of credit too for a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. But to have a private company who they're not getting income from conservation permits or anything like that, to have them spend their money that they're getting in other means, I think was really impressive. And I hope that, it's an example to other folks that are looking for ways to contribute and, not just the money, but the time too. It's like you mentioned, it's a serious undertaking to work between a number of different entities, the Utah Division of Wildlife and North Dakota, Fish and Game, and then a reservation that's, their own entity. And to be able to orchestrate all of the logistics of that is a lot more than most people would realize. And so really impressed. And like I say, I hope that it's something that, can be a good example to other folks and going forward.
I hope that's one thing that we actually accomplish with this podcast, is getting this out to all these different entities, agencies, is that people do look for those opportunities to give their, like you said, not just the funding, but the time and any really effort that anybody can provide to help projects like this. Encourage everybody to do that if they can. When it came to the project of moving the bighorns from Montana to Utah, I guess now, and to North Dakota, but mainly moving it to Utah and Antelope Island, was that decision strictly your guys' decision on where you wanted those bighorns to be, or did any other agency have a plan or a say in where the animals were going to go?
No, that's ours. And the conservation groups we work closely with Utah Wild Sheep Foundation. They obviously were huge in this process too, and their contributions and and their passion, their interest. So we worked closely with a number of those groups and making them aware of what we wanted to do. It's the animals are, there's no strings attached, as far as Kuyu goes or anybody else, or those other groups. They are here now, and they're the jurisdiction of the Utah Division of Wildlife, and we're going to manage them in trust for Utahns, so that Utahns can appreciate them and enjoy them. And so I think that those other groups were happy to hear that we had a good place to take them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's icing on top for them. But no, it's those animals belong to Utahns, and as the state wildlife agency and responsible or trusted with managing the animals, that's where we chose to put them.
That's awesome. In the video, it looked like pretty much every bighorn that was released had a collar on them. How are they doing since the release? Are they all doing well there right now?
Yeah, doing great. They're all alive and well up on the mountain. They are in habitat that I think is great stuff. I mean, couldn't be doing better. They're all behaving themselves.
That's awesome. The bad thing about podcasts is no one can see the huge smile that I have on my face right now, just because I still consider myself a Utah, and this excites me. This is freaking awesome. So
It is. Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, you think about having those animals there, and hopefully it means that we'll be able to start more populations or augment the populations that we already have. It's a big deal. You're absolutely right.
It is, and and people realize that when we published that article, we put it on Facebook. The comments and the feedback and the everything that we got back on that, it is a big deal, and I think most hunters realize how big a deal this is, both in-state hunters as well as out-of-state hunters, people that just have that passion for hunting and conservation and just wildlife in general. They see this as a big win all across the board, which is so cool. With this new introduction the introduction of this new herd, is there, and actually you made a comment already of what the DWR has done so far, and I guess actually it wasn't even the DWR, it was the state parks that actually built that fence on the southern end. But my first question is there any fear of that respiratory disease impacting this new herd now that the old herd is gone? And is the DWR or the states and parks doing anything else to help make sure that respiratory disease doesn't affect this new herd?
That's a great question. First question, yeah, there's always concern.
Yeah,
all bighorn herds are always at risk and susceptible. It's nobody's fault, but bighorn sheep just did not evolve with resistance or immunities to certain pathogens that are now here, with the European settlement, and so it's always a concern. There's no immunity that we know of, like a superior immune gene pool of animals, and there aren't great treatments that are realistic for herds. And so, yeah, there's always concern. And so there's concern with all of our herds in the state. And so, yeah, there's measures going. It's something that people don't realize is the amount of effort that it takes to mitigate or reduce the risk of pathogen transmission to bighorn sheep is ongoing and constant in all of our herds. Our biologists spend a lot of time trying to prevent pathogen transmission and keep bighorns healthy. So things that are happening on specifically to Antelope Island, you talked about the fence being built on the south end. Hopefully that keeps bighorns from leaving and coming back, or other animals from going and bringing pathogens there. We have always tried to manage for a small population on Antelope Island. We did regular translocations, and the goal being that having the small herd hopefully means that there's always plenty of habitat and they have no incentive to start wandering off of the island. And then also we hope that managing for a lower ram to ewe ratio, or so that if we let there be too many rams, we think that is incentive for those rams that cannot get breeding opportunities for them, more incentive for them to start leaving and wandering. And so we'll try to manage it for fewer rams, maybe a younger age structure of rams, which we were trying to do beforehand as well. The translocation that took place closest to prior to the disease event was when we thought we had perhaps too many rams, and so we moved quite a few rams off, more rams than ewes, less than a year before the disease event. And so, yeah, we've always tried to do that, and we'll continue to try to do that in the future, so that there's not incentive for those animals to start wandering.
Yeah, keep them there. Don't give them any reason to leave. I think that's priority number one. And I think with disease, I'm going to speak for you guys as biologists, but I think disease is something that keeps you guys up at night. I think that's something that any biologist is going to worry about. I talked to one of the biologists here in Colorado. His name's JT Romatsky, talking about the wolves coming into Colorado, and asked him if he worried about disease coming. And he's like, well, Yeah, I mean, we're biologists. We worry about diseases, so I think that's something
Yeah.
that's just that kind of comes along with your area of expertise. You guys kind of just have to worry about that. Do you guys have like a specific age class that you move out? You kind of talked a little bit about that, but is it when a ram or a ewe gets to a certain age, is that when you'd move them off the island, or does that really impact when you're taking them off?
It's not as much that we do feel like having a lot of old rams will make it so that there are not breeding opportunities for their young rams, and that's oftentimes who you end up seeing making these wandering events. Is during breeding season you'll get young rams who just don't have a chance to breed, and so they'll start to wander. And so, yeah, we try to keep the number of old rams down. But as far as translocations go, I mean, those are expensive, and sometimes they're hard to tell for the capture crew. They're oftentimes catching them with a helicopter, and so they don't have the luxury of being able to get that precise into which animals they remove. But
Gotcha.
through either hunting or translocations, we can watch the herd, monitor the herd, and manage for the appropriate number of animals.
Okay, gotcha.
And there is hunting, I should say, on Antelope Island too. That's another thing that's important, is that we can hunt Antelope Island with a very limited number of permits, and hopefully going forward we'll have maybe a little more flexibility with that, so that we can address if we ever have times where there's too many rams and we're not able to remove them, with the helicopter. Maybe we could do that with hunting. So that's hopefully another goal for the future.
Oh, nice. What does it take to get a tag on Antelope Island to do that?
Luck, a lot of luck. There's always been an auction permit, and then there's always been a draw permit too. So you just got to apply. Maybe I'll throw a plug in right now. The big game applications are open right now in Utah. Go on and apply. Go to our website, and then if you want to hunt Antelope Island, you won't be able to this year because we've had to cancel the hunt for the next few years. But yeah, I mean, it's been some lucky folks, luckier than me.
Nice.
But yeah.
Well, that's a good plug. That's actually a really good plug right now to put that out there. That opens. It closes March 4th. Is that right? Is that when the
fourth or fifth, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I've already put in. That's a great thing about being a non-resident for right now, is that I can put in for everything. I think I've said that on a few of these podcasts, and I probably ought to keep my mouth shut so that not everybody's putting in.
No,
but
yeah.
but that is one benefit of being a non-resident and being able to put in for multiple species or multiple limited entry species. So
Absolutely.
So what's your long-term plan for this herd? I mean, kind of the same thing. You're going to try to transplant them elsewhere within the state, and do you have certain herds that you're going to try and build with these specific sheep that you brought in?
Yeah, so the goal is to have 125 bighorns on Antelope Island. So as we exceed that, we'll hopefully be able to do translocations off of there. Yeah, we have a handful of different places that we're hoping to that still need work, but hopefully we can develop them to the point that they'll be able to sustain healthy bighorn sheep. And so hopefully we'll have those ready in the near future, and we can translocate and reintroduce animals there. And then also augmentations to our current herds. It all depends on their current status and performance, health-wise mostly. But if there's other herds that seem to be suitable destinations for augmentation, then hopefully we'll be able to take some of these Antelope Island bighorns and put them there as well. It all just depends. It's always a moving, ever-changing situation. So we'll see what we can do.
Well, I've learned something about wildlife biology, and that it's an art. It's something that you've got to orchestrate and like you said, ever evolve, ever change, and that's wonderful. And again, I wish people could see my face. This is a podcast, so you can't see my face, but the smile that's on my face is it's huge. Do you have any other transplant projects coming up in the near future, or is there plans to bring more transplanted into Antelope Island, or anything else? Any other projects coming up in the near future?
Yeah, this was a real busy winter for us. We moved quite a few sheep. So we actually brought some sheep from Oregon that came down to the Stansbury Mountains that I mentioned earlier. We had sheep that came from Nevada that started a new herd down in southern Utah, down by Beaver in the Mineral Mountains. And then we also had this translocation from Montana to Antelope Island to get that started. We've had translocations, the year before from Washington down into Utah. We hope to this next year, we're hopefully we're about done this year. The timing of it all, as far as when sheep are going to be having lambs, we're probably at the end of our timetable. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, next year, next winter, we'll hopefully be bringing more bighorn sheep to Antelope Island to augment the herd we have there, and then a handful of other ones that we're hoping, whether it's some of our other state agencies that want to work with us, other tribes or other folks. We're very much excited for a handful of places, and we hope that we'll be bringing more bighorn sheep into the state next year, or also around the state. So we're trying to stay busy.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, you guys are busy. I love it. Do you guys let normal folks like myself, volunteers, come and help out with some of these projects?
Sure, yeah, normal folks. Yeah, we're all normal folks. Yeah, yeah, you betcha. So in addition to the translocations, we had another about 60, maybe about 50 animals that we've caught in the state of Utah just to catch and not being translocated, but we catch them and then we put collars on them to, monitor health and survival. Like we talked about, the thing that helped us find the issue on Antelope Island in the first place. People are invited to those. And then like you saw for the Antelope Island release, people are invited to come to those releases. If you wanted to travel to another state and help with one of those captures, people could definitely get a hold of us, and we need the help oftentimes, so people are invited to come to those too. I think the best way to do that is just stay in touch with your local biologist or me at the Salt Lake office. And then also, I think it's another great way to do it is be involved with conservation organizations. That whole list that I mentioned earlier, Utah Archery Association or Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. The most pertinent one for bighorn sheep is the Utah Wild Sheep Foundation. They're aware of all the work that we're doing all the time. And some of those others that we talked about, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation or Mule Deer Foundation or, MWTF. I mean, all those folks, be involved. It'll help you to know more about what's going on, and you'll get opportunities to do fun things.
Well, I'm going to continue with that plug, and I encourage anybody and everybody to do that. Get in touch with these people. There's always things that you can do, and I believe I'm going to take advantage of this. You might be getting more phone calls and text messages from me over the next year or so, because I'd love to come with you. I already told Mike that I'm going to come and do some captures with him, because we just want to be involved. As hunters, I always say this, we don't sit on our hands very well. We always want to be involved. We always want to be a part of it and doing something. And so I'll probably be reaching out to you guys for sure to do some projects with you and just help, just volunteer some of my time to help out where I can. And I want to put that plug out to everybody listening to get out there, help these guys out. I think most of them are pretty open to having you hop in the truck with them and go help out. So please reach out and stay connected and stay in touch with them. So, well, Jace, I appreciate you jumping on the call with me today. Is there anything that we missed? Any other really big parts of this transplant that we didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so. I think, it was just a great thing for so many partners. We're really grateful for all the partners, especially grateful to KUIU and their contributions, and so we're just excited for it for the future. And we hope that having this herd on Antelope Island will be something that can benefit Utahns, not just in that part of the state, but all over the state. And we'll have more healthy bighorn sheep for everybody to enjoy, to use. And so we're excited for it.
Nice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. Next time I'm in Salt Lake, hopefully I can stop by the office and shake your hand and get to know you. Hopefully we're able to stay in contact over the next little bit, and as things change and progress, and if there's more transplant opportunities or projects that take place, hopefully we can jump on a call and record another podcast. But I really appreciate your time with me today, and I'll let you back to your duties.
No problem, Taryn.
Okay, thanks, Jace. Talk to you later, man. All right, guys, thanks again for listening, and thanks again to Vortex Optics and Onyx Maps for sponsoring this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone that you think would enjoy it. Thanks, guys.